Good morning everyone, I'm Giselle Somargo from BTL8HE2B. So today, we will talk about cocoa and chocolate. The production of chocolate introduction. Chocolate is a key ingredient in many foods such as milkshakes, candy bars, cookies, and cereals. It is ranked as one of the most favored flavors in North America and Europe. Despite its popularity, most people do not know the unique origins of this popular treat. Chocolate is a product that requires complex procedures to produce. The process involves harvesting cocoa, refining cocoa to cocoa beans, and shipping the cocoa beans to the manufacturing factory for cleaning, coaching, and grinding. These cocoa beans will then be imported or exported to other countries and be transformed into different types of chocolate products. Top 7 cocoa producing countries. So look at the picture. This is the top 7 cocoa producing countries. Harvesting cocoa and cocoa processing. Chocolate production starts with harvesting cocoa in a forest. Cocoa comes from tropical evergreen cocoa trees, such as Theobroma cocoa, which grow in the wet lowland tropics of Central and South America, West Africa, and Southeast Asia, within 20 Celsius of the equator. Cocoa needs to be harvested manually in the forest. The seed pods of cocoa will first be collected. The beans will be selected and placed in piles. These cocoa beans will then be ready to be shipped to the manufacturer for mass production. Step number 1. Plucking and opening the pods. Cocoa beans grow in pods that sprout off of the trunk and branches of cocoa trees. The pods are about the size of a football. The pods start out green and turn orange when they're ripe. When the pods are ripe, harvesters travel through the cocoa orchards with machetes and hack the pods gently off of the tree. Cocoa pods and harvesting. Machines could damage the tree or the clusters of flowers and pods that grow from the trunk, so workers must be harvest the pods by hand, using short hook blades mounted on long poles to reach the highest fruits. After the cocoa pods are collected into baskets, the pods are taken to a processing house. Here they are split open, the cocoa beans are removed. Pods can contain upwards of 50 cocoa beans each. Fresh cocoa beans are not brown at all. They do not taste like the sweet chocolate they will eventually produce. Step number 2. Fermenting the cocoa seeds. Now, the beans undergo the fermentation processing. They are either placed in large, shallow, heated trays or covered with the large banana leaves. If the climate is right, they may be simply heated by the sun. Workers come along periodically and stir them up so that all of the beans come out equally fermented. During fermentation is when the beans turn brown. This process may take 5 or 8 days. The fermentation of cocoa beans. Step number 3. Drying the cocoa seeds. After fermentation, the cocoa seeds must be dried before they can be scooped into sacks and shipped to chocolate manufacturers. Farmers simply spread the fermented seeds on trees and leave them in the sun to dry. The drying process usually takes about a week and results in seeds that are about half of their original weight. The dried and roasted cocoa beans. Manufacturing chocolate. Once the cocoa beans have reached the machinery of chocolate factories, they are ready to be refined into chocolate. Generally, manufacturing processes differ slightly due to the different species of cocoa trees, but most factories use similar machines to break down the cocoa beans into cocoa butter and chocolate. Firstly, fermented and dried cocoa beans will be refined to a roasted nib by winnowing and roasting. Then, they will be heated and will melt into chocolate liquor. And lastly, manufacturers blend chocolate liquor with sugar and milk to add flavor. After blending the process, the liquid chocolate will be stored or delivered to the molding factory in the tanks and will be poured into molds for sale. Finally, wrapping and packaging machines will pack the chocolates and then they will be ready to transport. So, a diagram showing the manufacturing process. So, look at the picture. This is a diagram showing the manufacturing process. Step number 1. Roasting and winnowing the cocoa. The first thing that chocolate manufacturers do with cocoa beans is roast them. This develops the color and flavor of the beans into what are modern. Pellets expect from fine chocolate. The outer shell of the beans is removed, and the inner cocoa bean meat is broken into small pieces called cocoa nibs. The roasting process makes the shells of the cocoa brittle and cocoa nibs pass through a series of sieves, which strain and sort the nibs according to size in a process called winnowing. Step number 2. Grinding the cocoa nibs. Grinding is the process by which cocoa nibs are ground into cocoa liquor, which is also known as unsweetened chocolate or cocoa mass. The grinding process generates heat and the dry granular consistency of the cocoa nib is then turned into a liquid as the high amount of fat contained in the nib melts. The cocoa liquor is mixed with cocoa butter and sugar. In the case of milk chocolate, fresh, sweetened, condensed, or roller dry low heat, powdered whole milk is added depending on the individual manufacturer's formula and manufacturing methods. Step number 3. Blending cocoa liquor and molding chocolate. After the mixing process, the blend is further refined to bring the practical size of the added milk, sugar, and down to the desired fineness. The cocoa powder or mass is blended back with the butter and liquor is varying quantities to make different types of chocolate or couverture. The basic blends with ingredients roughly in order of highest quantity first are as follows. Milk chocolate, sugar, milk or milk powder, cocoa liquor or cocoa butter, lysine, and vanilla. White chocolate, sugar, milk or milk powder, cocoa liquor, cocoa butter, lysine, and vanilla. Plain dark chocolate, cocoa powder, cocoa liquor, cocoa butter, sugar, and lysine, and vanilla. Finally, the chocolate is packaged and distributed around the world. Thank you for watching and God bless us all.